Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. As our attendees filter in, I could just run through some short elements up front. We will be having our fireside chat with Tamara and Shellye for the first hour or so of our session today. But you have the opportunity throughout to be able to submit questions. You'll see there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and you can submit questions through there. And we also have the chat function as well, where you can submit your questions. So we'll just carry on giving a few minutes as the rest of our attendees filter through before we hand over to Tamara and Shellye. So as more of our guests join us this evening, just another reminder, through the session, we'll be having Tamara and Shellye having a fireside chat for the first hour or so, but there's the opportunity afterwards for questions. And you'll see at the bottom of the screen, we've got the Q&A function where you'll be able to submit your questions throughout the event. And we also have the chat function as well. And hopefully you've all seen on our invite, but we actually have a raffle this evening as well. We'll be giving away a gift hamper to one of our attendees. So keep an eye out afterwards for an email from Reed Smith, and we'll be in touch with you about if you're the lucky winner. And so with that, Tamara, I think we have some more of our attendees due to join, so I'll pause for another minute or so. Great, well, it looks like we've got a number of our attendees have joined. So Tamara and Shellye, I'll hand over to you to kick us off.
Perfect. Thank you, Kate. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. I'm really delighted to welcome you all to what I know is going to be an hour and a half of inspiration, learning, and fun. I'm Tamara Box. I have the privilege of being in the senior management team here at Reed Smith, as well as being our managing partner for our Europe and Middle East region. I am thrilled to get to share the joy that is Shellye Archambeau with all of you. Welcome, Shellye.
Oh, thank you. I've been looking forward to this.
Me too. So I want to set the scene a little bit for our audience and tell those of you who have not read Shellye's book yet, and I say yet very deliberately here, a little bit about Shellye. Shellye's parents had 4 children in 5 years. And even though her father had a good job at IBM, they weren't exactly rich. And the priority for their money was always education, making sure the kids were in the best school districts to take advantage of all the educational opportunities. Shellye recalls that the family's super thrifty approach meant that she always felt cold in her own house. Here's how she recalls that. The temperature in the house never went above 68. Never. So literally, I would drink hot water in the house. I'd wear gloves at times in the house. It was terrible. I finally said, how much money do I need to make to keep the thermostat at 72? So it would follow that when her high school guidance counselor asked her what she wanted to do, she answered, I'm not sure, but I want to make sure that I'm able to be independent. The counselor dug a little deeper. What would you like to do? Shellye, a teenager of all of 16, said, I like clubs and I like running them. So the counselor responded, Oh, running a business is just like running clubs, lining people to a same objective, figure out a strategy, going and executing and making it happen. Decisively, Shellye said, oh, done. That's what I'm going to do. So she started her career at IBM with the stated objective, get this, of becoming the CEO of that company. Her career journey took her through several roles there, including the Vice President of Public Sector Industries in the Asia Pacific Division, becoming the first African American woman to take on an international executive role at IBM, and also getting to live in Japan to boot. The path to a CEO role eventually took her to Blockbuster Inc., where in 1999 she became Senior Vice President of their nascent e-commerce division. In 2000, she was named Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer of Northpoint Communications. In 2001, she served as Chief Marketing Officer and Executive Vice President for Loud Cloud Inc. In 2002, she became CEO of Zaplet Inc., overseeing the company's merger with MetricStream in 2004 and helping to grow MetricStream from a startup with fewer than 50 employees into a powerhouse of more than 1,200 employees. She stepped down only in 2018, and only after assisting in the search for her successor, who would take on the role with his or her own style and priorities. She herself had originally accepted the position only after being reassured that she would be free to develop the strategy and the culture in her own way, unencumbered by the specter of previous leaders. And she knew that it was right to let the next CEO do the same. She currently serves on the boards of public companies Verizon, Nordstrom, Roper Technologies, and Okta. She's a strategic advisor to Forbes Ignite and to the president of the Arizona State University, and she serves on the boards of two national nonprofits, Catalyst and Braven. So in 2020, with all her spare time, Shellye released her second book, Unapologetically Ambitious, described by Goodreads as full of empowering wisdom. And I assure you, it is definitely that, and so much more. Naming it one of the best business books of 2020, Forbes said the book is a story not just of breaking barriers, but one that offers practical advice on turning your differences into a competitive advantage, unabashedly owning your personal and professional ambitions, and harnessing the power of your voice to create opportunities for others. And here we are, lucky enough to have this amazing author and leader here with us today to share the lessons learned from her personal journey and to give us advice on how we can all be unapologetically ambitious. I'm so excited, Shellye.
Oh my goodness. What an intro. Thank you, Tamara.
Of course. So your book shows that you planned out a map for your life, your career path, including what were the milestones along the way to your goal to be CEO, as well as your personal life, when to get married, when to have children, when to do anything and everything, what role your partner needed to play. And pretty much your whole life, you stuck to that plan. In fact, you set out to be a CEO at IBM, but you pivoted to moving into a different environment when the route to IBM's top job didn't seem to fit to your prescribed time frame. You still became CEO at the same time in your life that you had planned to do so, even before you started university. Do you recommend that sort of detailed plan to everyone? Indeed, if you were starting out today in 2021, would you still have such a structured plan?
That's a great question. So now, no, you don't have to be quite as rigid or structured as I was, but I will say, that's it. I will say that the reason I planned was because I wanted to improve my odds. When I was coming up and I decided, okay, I want to run a company. I mean, honestly, I didn't know what that really meant, right? The guidance counselor said it's like clubs. And I said, great, done. I'm goal oriented. Fine, I'll do that. But when I looked around, all the people that I could see, because there was no internet, all the people that I could see that were running companies, not one of them looked like me. I didn't see women. I didn't see Blacks. I didn't see, right? It was like, okay, so the odds are not in my favor. So I figured if I just did what everybody else does, it wasn't going to happen. So I had to figure out how to improve my odds. And planning and being intentional was my way of trying to improve the odds. So, does everybody have to do that? The answer is no, everybody doesn't have to. But if you actually do some of it, if you act with more intention, if you actually plan out a strategy and an approach, I think everyone can actually improve their odds to get what they want and achieve their aspirations.
Perfect. I like it. Plan. Must remember that's definitely not my strong suit. So you researched, and this is a perfect example. You researched this plan to success carefully, and it included calling people who held the jobs you aspired to reach to ask what the job entailed and how they got there. You determined early on that top jobs seemed to go disproportionately to those who had experience in sales. So why sales? Is it because salespeople have particular personality traits? They're extroverts, they have enthusiasm, or they have competitiveness that makes them naturally good at leadership? Or is sales a skill that can and presumably should be learned by those aspiring to top jobs?
So I think it's a bit of all of that, actually. When I decided to start in sales, which, oh, by the way, was totally counterintuitive, because I was coming out of Wharton, and everybody at Wharton was going off to be investment bankers, right? Going to be international financiers, Procter & Gamble product managers. I mean, all these sexy, cool titles. And I'm going to go sell computers. What? But every single CEO at IBM had started out in sales. So I didn't know what it was about sales, but I saw that as the path to power. So I said, okay, I'm going to do sales. It wasn't because I suddenly said, oh my God, I love sales, right? No, I just did it because I thought it was the right skill set, right? Based upon what history showed. Now, what I will tell you, having done my stints in sales, I personally think that sales is an outstanding job for everybody at some point.
Right.
You learn so much that you will leverage throughout your career, which is why, a lot of CEOs, I think, have sales experience. But you learn how to handle no's. And you learn that a no is not the end of the world. So you learn how to handle objections. You learn how to negotiate. You learn how to watch and read the room, right? And look for power and influence. You learn how to, all of these things, how to package things up in a value proposition, how to really listen and respond, right, to needs and requirements. You learn all of that in sales, which you need in any role and job as you go forward.
Yeah. I loved it. When I read that in your book, it was the first time I realized I started out, all my kids, kid age jobs were in sales.
Yep,
I sold the Disney Channel and telemarketing and everything. And, never really thought about it till I read what you said about it and thought, absolutely, sales teaches you so much. Makes you start thinking about training in every organization and whether we should send everyone into sales training at some point. So,
yeah, there you go.
Well, let me pivot a little bit, and you devote a segment of the book to imposter syndrome. There's a lot out there about it. Is this, in your view, is it a manifestation of a lack of confidence, or is it something that affects people across the board? Men, women, Black, white? Is it possible for a white man of privilege to feel imposter syndrome? Are millennials entering the workforce today more likely to be confident, or are they more likely to have imposter syndrome? Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Definitely, because as I was writing the book, because imposter syndrome played such a big role in my life, I mean, I've suffered from it forever. I still do at times, but it's ridiculous, right? But it happens. So in looking at it and reading the research, turns out just about everybody suffers from imposter syndrome at some point or another. It's true, women more so than men. Women of color, the most. So what that tells me is it's not personal. It's not a lack of confidence, right, in and of itself. It must be in the air. If we all suffer from it, then it's in the air. So if it's in the air, what that means is it's not real. It's not real, right? It's like television, right? It looks real, sounds real. It can even feel real. You get scared, you get whatever. We tell our kids all the time, it's not real. Don't be scared, right? It's not real. Don't be scared. And then we shut it off if it gets too bad, right? Well, that voice that we hear, we need to shut that thing off. It is not real.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I think if we all had a Shellye Archambeau in our head saying, shut that off, that would help too.
Yeah, see, but actually, I think everybody should have, because one of the things I also talk about in the book is the whole cheerleader concept.
Absolutely.
Because life is hard. People don't tell you this. I mean, it's rare that you actually read books and people tell their stories and they actually say life is hard. It's hard. It's hard for everyone. I don't care how easy it looks on the outside. It is hard for everybody. So just because it gets hard, don't stop. Just get more help. And cheerleaders are a great way of getting help. And by the way, when I say cheerleaders, I really mean cheerleaders, Tamara. I mean, go, Tamara, go, Susan, go, Jason, go, Shellye, you got it. The reason is we need the help and the encouragement. There's so many things coming down from the sky telling us how we are not quite, and then fill in the blank, right? Not quite good enough, not quite young enough, not quite smart enough, not quite technical enough, not quite, I mean, all these things. We need people to remind us all of the things that we are. So when that voice is drilling into our head that we're not capable, and wait till they figure out that we don't know as much as they think we know, and that whole imposter syndrome thing, we need people reminding us that we actually do know what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I love it. I always think about, having your own personal sort of board of advisors, but really what I mean, I think, is my, cheerleading squad, right? and we should all have it. Absolutely. Well, kind of thinking about that, I'm going to pivot a little bit more to sort of the concept of resilience. And, you really talk about Metric Stream sort of teaching you resilience under extreme pressure.
For sure.
After winning a big customer contract when Metric Stream was what you said, running on fumes, you and your team added a core value to the company culture and made it your mantra. What was it?
Never say die. Never say die.
Tell us how you came to define the company and how that helped to chart, the future and its resilience.
Yes, so when I came to Metric Stream, in the beginning, it was actually a very broken company. So everything needed to be changed. Value proposition needed to be determined. And once that was determined, they needed to get the right skills, the right people, et cetera. And so from the very beginning was very much a restart. Well, when you do a restart, it's actually a great opportunity to actually set the culture that you want, right? And one that you think will indeed be able to move forward, be successful, et cetera. So as we built out our culture, it was really all about customer focus, teamwork. And by the way, teamwork doesn't mean just being nice and polite. Teamwork means being someone that your teammates can count on, right? You do what you say you're going to do, right? Teamwork. I see all that coming together. Innovation. And those were the three until we went through that horrific period. And then we added, you know what? Never say die. And basically, never say die meant that we were going to figure out how to make it happen, whatever the it was. So if it was survival, if it was getting this product out, if it was, it's resolving this customer problem, whatever the it was, this was not can't do it. It was, oh, no, we are going to die trying because we are never saying die. We are going to make it happen. And as a result, we ended up with a view, even from our customers, of being really good partners because we were there. I mean, if bad things happen, okay, they happen, fine. Now we're all in it and we're in it until, it kind of gets resolved. And so all of that, I think, works when you really put it together, when you reinforce it. I used to have hiring conversations whenever we had new hires, once a quarter, the new hire brown bag. And every one of those, I'd review the culture, review why, and then I tell everybody, you're now a cultural ambassador. So if you don't see the right behaviors, you have absolute right to call people on it and remind them what we're supposed to be doing.
That's great. I love it. Well, it does put me in mind. I like the make it happen. Puts me in mind of a business we do some work with who have a head of make shit happen, right? Which I just think is the best title for a job ever, And it sounds like really that should have been your title all along.
Oh, that's great.
So I want to shift a little bit back maybe into, the sort of personal, Shellye. I mean, you've had this incredible career and you had a very long and happy marriage to a wonderful man who seemed like an unlikely choice. And you talk a lot about that in your book. He was 18 years older than you were. You didn't originally think he was marriage material. He didn't fit the profile really that your plan had. And you almost refused to go on a second date. But this is more than a story about love. It's also a lesson in judging a book by its cover. You practically interviewed him before committing any time to that relationship. And you were surprised to find that despite all the differences, he was completely in sync with your ambitions, even to the point of being willing to take on the role of supporting spouse, looking after the home, children, when the time was right, of course.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about people's choices about their life partners and what that does and how that figures into career ambitions? And, is this more about a sort of business transaction than romance? Although clearly you had a wonderful romance. And is it possible to have both? And again, I think you're the perfect example of that. So maybe talk a little about that, because I think it's something that certainly for our younger audience, and even maybe for not some of our younger audience, is, it's a big deal getting that right, that balance.
It really is. And, the way I came to this was the way I approach goals in general. So I asked myself, okay, what is it I'm trying to achieve? And
Right.
here I was in college and I wanted to be a CEO. Okay. So what has to be true? Well, that's when you do the research. And so I looked at CEOs, I read about them the whole bit. And back when I was coming up, because this is now, college, early 80s, all the CEOs I could find, if they were married, they had stay-at-home wives.
Of course.
A lot of them moved, right? A lot of them, I'm thinking, okay, so what has to be true? Well, if I want to be CEO, I need to have a spouse who is actually willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it wasn't even one of these things. It just seemed like, okay, that's an obvious thing that I need.
Yeah.
And so that's how that kind of got on the list. Other things that were on my list were things like I wanted a spouse who could cook, because I didn't want to have to do all the cooking. I wanted somebody who was clean for the same reason. So I made this kind of list of, okay, here's what I want. Now, at the same time, did I go out, interviewing everybody to figure out who I was going to date? No. Even when I went out with Scotty, the list wasn't even on the table. It was very much, I just thought I was infatuated because I told him no and he kept coming back and I finally said, okay, right? But it wasn't until I was getting serious and thought, you know what, he could be real marriage material despite all the things. So let's dig into this. And it was really the digging into it. This is just talking and understanding and having that conversation. Because honestly, I wanted a long-term relationship, right? I wanted long-term partnership. And I wanted to have children and I wanted to be a CEO. And so I wanted to see, okay, are you interested in these same things, right? Will this become our vision and our plan together? Because if it is, then this is going to work so much better, right? In terms of over time. So very much like I frankly do in business, I do at home, which is, all right, do we have a common vision? If we have a common vision, great. Are we all committed, right, to being able to deliver on it? And then you figure out, so that's kind of what we did. So Scotty and I ended up with a common vision for what we were trying to do.
Yeah, it's a fantastic story, and thank you for sharing it. I suppose following on from that, you make a great point in the book about work-life integration, which has always been my favorite alternative to work-life balance. It has to be work-life integration. You integrate your work and your life in the ways that you just described. And you can't balance. It's not a scale, right? Talk to us a little bit about, how you see that distinction.
Really, gosh, it is so exactly. It's definitely the same way, because what is a balance? Right? A balance, it's a fixed structure. All right? A fixed structure that has weights on both sides that never move. It's static. Whose life is static? Not mine, not yours. Nobody's life is static, right? Life kind of goes like this. All these things happen. I mean, come on, 2020 alone, right? I mean, no, life is not static. So to use that as the bar and the measure and the goal, we all fail. We all fail. So why, we have enough things we're trying to do. Why fail at that, right? So no, I think it's much more important to remember that we're one person, right? I'm one person. Yes, I have professional priorities and I have personal priorities. I put them together and then I prioritize ruthlessly. And this is the key, ruthlessly, so that you can get done what you absolutely need to get done, which means some things aren't going to get done. And you either have to find somebody else to do them or be willing to live with it, right? But at least it's now your choice. Because if instead you try to put everything on the same plate, just keep piling things in, well, stuff's going to fall off. And when it falls off, it breaks. Much better either not to put it on or to take it off yourself, right? So this whole work-life integration is really how I see things. And honestly, the other thing is, I don't have enough time. I don't know anybody who has enough time. So,
Yeah.
right? And so therefore I try to double things up. If I can go for a walk, get some exercise, and have a meeting by talking at the same time, I'm doing it, right? If I can bring friends along when I go to see a show, I'm doing that, right? I'm trying to do multiple things at the same time because I don't have time.
Yeah. No, I love it. My husband always says to me that I can make any work situation social and any social situation work. And I always think, well, that's it. That's integration. That's surely the
Absolutely,
goal,
absolutely. Love it.
right? So if you love what you do, that helps too, I guess.
It does.
So, kind of thinking about choices here, you made some very hard decisions in your career, including taking no salary for a period of time when your company was on the verge of failure, as well as living apart from your family when you needed to move out of state after you promised your daughter she wouldn't have to move again. And you make the point that these things are not sacrifices, but rather choices. You don't feel like a martyr, nor do you feel guilt from these choices. You also never look back and say, what if? At the end of the day, you've chosen to be where you are, who you are and how you live. So following on from some of the things you've just said, how what advice do you offer for our audience on how to make those hard choices and not look back and not have guilt? And certainly for the women among us, the guilt is the specter. We're constantly fighting it.
Right. You know, I sacrifice to me is something that you do for someone else, right? 100%.
Right.
You do it for someone else. Well, the problem with making sacrifices is the person that you are doing this for can never, ever show enough gratitude, enough thankfulness, right? Enough appreciation over time. It just can't. So it puts this huge pressure on them because look at all I did for you, right? And you don't even appreciate it. Well, I've said thank you. That's not enough. And it's not enough
Right.
because you suddenly feel like you did all this for them, not for you. Well, when you do that, you give away your power, right? You give away your power. Much better to actually look at decisions, make them with all the information you have, right? What from other people's perspectives, etc. But then make it for you.
Right.
You make it consciously. And now when you make it, you own it. You own it. And so by owning it, there's no one to feel upset with or the whole bit. It's you, right? In terms of what you've done. So I just found it to be much more empowering just to make choices versus sacrifices. And and I could have, right? When I did that commute with my daughter, I could have totally told people, oh yeah, I'm commuting because of my daughter. Wanted to make sure that she did not have to move in high school, so I'm flying back and forth once a week. I mean, I could have played the whole thing, right?
Right.
What good does that do? It makes her feel terrible. Oh my God, look what I'm doing to my mother. Right? I mean, what good does that do? So instead, as we're thinking about choices, make the best choice you can with the information you have available at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you do that, then the woulda, coulda, shouldas are actually lessened because you did the best you could. You made the best decision at the time. Now you made it with more data, okay, but you didn't have it back then. So
Right.
it's just like in business, you're not going to go fire somebody because they made a decision with the best information they had, right? But then something else came up, and so you're going to go, no. I mean, come on. So treat yourself just as well, right? Treat yourself just as well, as long as you did the work to really try to understand the dynamics and all the input and then make it, then live with it and keep going. And trust me, when your kids see you do that, it'll model the right behavior.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I think of it as the sort of glass half empty versus glass half full version of, those decisions, because the glass half empty says it's a sacrifice and makes it hard. Whereas, the choice, the glass half full angle, empowers, as you say, it makes it something you're doing for good reasons, that you're proud of. And
Right.
it may be hard. Lots of things we're proud of are hard. But they were still the right decisions and decisions that you own. Again, I think that empowering is a really important angle.
Exactly.
That's great. Well, you also offer one of my favorites in the book, a very powerful lesson about delegating responsibility. And you say that once you demonstrate that you know how to do something, it will become your job. And furthermore, you say, the more you do, the less you get paid. By the way, I tend to use a similar tactic in my household. because apparently I definitely am hopelessly incapable of unloading the dishwasher properly. So guess what? My husband never asked me to go near the dishwasher.
Yep.
So your lesson is primarily for those in organizations, and admittedly, these are often women, who are asked to do the housekeeping for the office. You know, you take up the collection for the birthdays, you arrange details, or send out emails, you know, make committee meeting arrangements, etc. So without coming across as being arrogant or unwilling to be a team player, how do we refuse to do those jobs, or at least to always do those jobs that never seem to fall, you know, either to our male peers or indeed to those who somehow, you know, are in the spotlight? What do we do to make that change?
Yeah. So once we've done it once, I mean, you have to do it once, right? Everybody should be doing these things. It's not a matter of you shouldn't do them. It's just that everyone should be doing them. So once you've actually done it and it comes to you again, because oh, you did such a nice job taking notes, right? Why don't you take notes again? So when that comes through, you can say, oh, thanks. I appreciate the compliment. But you know what? I think we need other people that have that skill around this table too. You just make it a bit of a, you know, a lighthearted pass. Okay. If it's something like, you know, somebody comes and they want you to take up something or do whatever it might be, you could say, you know what? John hasn't had a chance to participate in blah, 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 blah. Right? I mean, you should, I mean, it literally, you just try to deflect. Again, always positively, right? Never say, why are you always asking me? Why don't you ask so-and-so? I mean, because then you're actually seen as the one with the attitude. So don't show the attitude, make it lighthearted, right? Make it simple, but deflect like Teflon, right? It's coming your way, right? Boom, boom, right? Make sure that you are making, that the love is being shared, right, around.
Exactly.
And if it's still coming, right? So you start to do that, but it's still coming, then this is when you have a one-on-one, not in a group setting, but a one-on-one. And you could just say, you know, Tamara, you may not realize it, but I'm actually the only one you ever asked to do this, right? So I appreciate that you think I'm competent and capable, whatever, but frankly, I think I've got this, right? It'd be great for somebody else to also have the chance. So again, keep it, you know, you can have the conversation, try to keep it, right, a little bit light, but don't mess with your attitude, because if you show attitude, you know, one of the things I used to say, what honestly, especially people I coached or people whenever, I would tell them, your attitude is showing. Right. It doesn't help. Just like you do slip, you used to have slips back when women wore slips. You know, you used to tell people, oh, your slip is showing, right? I use attitude. Your attitude's showing, because honestly, what people remember is how you make them feel. Forget words, forget anything else. What they remember is how you make them feel. And if you have an attitude, you actually make them feel negative, because it's like, okay, what did I do to you? Exactly. And that's what they remember. All the good stuff you've done, all the everything else, what they remember is how you made them feel. So don't show the attitude.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. I think humor is often the right answer to almost any difficult situation, you know, whether it's difficult colleagues, et cetera. And so I love the idea of no attitude.
Can we talk about difficult colleagues for just a minute? Tamara, is that all right?
Let's.
I saw something pop up in the chat on this. So one of the questions that people ask sometimes, well, how do you deal with that person that is like just after you, you know, either out to get you or setting traps or, you know, tearing you down and, you know, behind closed doors, you know, the one that's talking bad about you off to the side. How do you handle those people? Well, let me tell you what I took a little while, but here's what I learned to do. You shower them with praise. And let me explain what I mean by this, because you only do it in public, in public. So in public, whenever you're in public together or you're in a group meeting or whatever, you make sure that you find something to compliment them or their team about. All right. Now, what happens is people notice that. And then when the person says, oh, do you know what, Shellye, blah, 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 all of a sudden there's like this discontinuity. So wait a minute, Shellye has nothing but good things to say about you. Why are you always like tearing her down? What is it? I don't see it. You know, so all of a sudden what happens is it becomes their issue and not your issue.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's my number one approach. So when you have those people, I just, oh my God, you know, I think they are amazing. And I tell all the positive things. And then next thing I know, anything they say is just muted. People don't pay attention.
Absolutely. And then they have to say nice things about you back, or they look really awful. It's a great question. So I want to turn a little bit to something that I know is a passion for you, which is mentoring and networking. And they've been very powerful forces in your career. The book tells the story of how you adopted mentors and access their experience and wisdom to help you find useful solutions in a variety of situations. And then when you first became CEO, you suddenly found that you had no real peers or mentors that could give you advice and help you explore the alternatives for your actions. What did you do to fill the void? I mean, we hear a lot that it's lonely at the top. It's lonely in those jobs. It's hard. So what did you do?
Yes, no, it was interesting because you're right. Mentally, I knew that, right? Everybody says, oh, once you get to be CEO, it's lonely. Mentally, you know that. But it's not till you're actually in the job that you feel it. Because suddenly you either report to them, like the board of directors, or people report to you, right? Nobody who's your peer. You can't go to somebody and let your hair down and say, oh my God, can you believe it? Right? So I need peers. I'm like, okay, I needed peers. So I literally just recruited peers. I am in Silicon Valley, and this is still the early 2000s. There aren't a ton of women running companies. Not many people look like me running companies. So I literally said, you know what? I'm pulling together a group of women that are also trying to build companies. And we became each other's peers. There were basically about 10 of us. And we get together once a quarter, but it wasn't even the once a quarter get together. It was all the calls in between. It was once we had that relationship and that trust, because we would share, here's what I'm dealing with. God, I have to redo the cap table, right? Has anybody done a cap table? Or I'm trying to get this model done, or I'm trying to, right? I need an investment banker. I need whatever it is. Pardon, allergies. So that really worked for me. I mean, we kept that. Matter of fact, a semblance and a part of that group still goes on today. We all joined C200.
C200. I was going to say, I know where that's going.
So, yeah, so we kind of built our businesses up, and then we all joined C200. So that's been going. That thing went on for almost 20 years. So it was an amazing setup. So yes, if you don't have the people around you that you need, go get them.
Right.
Go get them. You'd be amazed how many people actually either want to be helpful, can use the help, or want the support structure. So that's my big advice. Don't just live with what you've got, right? Create what you need.
Yeah. It's for me, it comes back to that board of advisors and how you kind of get there with them. And sometimes they're your cheerleaders, but they're sometimes also the very people that say, oh no, you got to step back here. So I think it's great. And of course we will, I know, have a number of C200 fabulous women on the call. So I think it's great that we're able to share that in common. Certainly a great group of advisors and pals and peers. So thinking about the sort of getting ideas and using your peers, one vital element, and I think you stress a lot of this, is diversity, and thinking about, who you're talking to. You stress that too many people today think that means differences based on ethnicity, gender, etc., but that it isn't really that diversity of thought and diversity that comes from looking outside your own company and beyond culture, it drives the consistency of thinking into the realm and into a realm that has experiences and possibilities unknown to you and your company. So you first really became aware of that need to look outside your own organization when you were at Blockbuster, and you tell some great stories and examples around that. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. So my entire network when I was at IBM, which I was at IBM for 14 years as I was rising through the ranks, my entire network were IBMers because I moved around a ton. So who was consistent, right? People who worked for IBM. And you're working so much and it's such a large organization. So just about anything I felt I needed, there was somebody at IBM who had it, right? So it wasn't until I left IBM and went to Blockbuster that I realized, when I'm sitting on a plane with the chief marketing officer, I'm the president of blockbuster.com, and forgot even where we're going. But Jim says to me, so Shellye, who do you use for advice and counsel and what have you, bounce ideas off of? And I said, and I named a few people, but they were all people in Blockbuster. He said, no, I mean outside of the company. And I was like, I'm supposed to be talking to people outside of the company? I just hadn't even thought about it. So it's like, oh, okay. So that was my learning to say, all right, I need to build a network that's broader to get that outside in. And he went on to share who some of his advisors were and how he uses them. And it was a wonderful conversation. And it absolutely clicked. From that point on, I made sure that I was absolutely reaching out and establishing relationships, not just in terms of, yes, people I know, the whole bit, but I mean, trusted relationships where I could literally go to people and share what's happening, get their advice, get their perspectives. And it's super powerful, super powerful. I wish I had realized it earlier.
Yeah, no, it's that looking outside the organization. I think we all get blinders very easily, and we also forget how, again, we're all in organizations are the same, more alike than we are different in a lot of ways. And so, what you can learn, and I think you have some great examples from Zaplet as well. You did the same thing, really looking outside the organization and asking, customers, what do they want? How do they,
Exactly.
how do you make the business better? So,
Yeah, definitely. I call it the outside in approach. Try to look at things from the outside perspective.
yeah, and I think sometimes it's kind of back to the peer point as well, figuring out who you ask to get that outside view. And while that will likely be different, any tips on where people start? I mean, is it always sort of customer? Is it peer? Is it, I mean, where's the best place to think about how do I start getting a real perspective? I mean, we all want to know how our organizations are viewed, for example, but who do you ask? I mean, everybody has a sort of agenda. How do you when in Zaplet, for example, and MetricStream, when you really needed, to pivot and understand what you were doing, how did you go about that?
Yeah, I did it based upon what I was trying to do. So what I was trying to figure out was a problem, a business problem that was a need to solve problem, urgent. All right, that people
Right.
would be willing to spend significant dollars for. I didn't know what that problem was, but that's what I needed to find, because I needed, then once I had the problem, then I could figure out how do we solve it. And now I had a value proposition to go build a business, because this was a restart. So who were the people? And that's what I asked myself, who are the people that would know this?
Who
And
has
so,
problems?
yeah. So I said, okay. So I went and talked to people who are investors, especially early stage, they're seeing new trends, whatever.
Right.
I talked to senior people and companies to understand what are the problems you're dealing with? What's not being solved today, right? That would be very helpful. So I was focused on the market externally, investors, customers, call it companies, et cetera. Those were the main people that I was talking to about what are you seeing and what are the problems. And that's frankly how I came to the whole area of compliance and risk.
Right.
All right. Because, I think Marjorie McNamee was the first one who said it to me. He's like, Shellye, this whole compliance thing, there's more rules, more regulations. It's getting more and more expensive. I don't know what you do about it, but I don't think there's a company out there that wouldn't like to reduce their cost of compliance. And I went, click, click. All right, let's figure out how we can go do that. So, so that's how it happened. So for anything that you're trying to solve for, think through who has the best bird's eye view of this particular problem.
Right.
Because that'll be different every time. So I don't think it's necessarily a good idea to use the same advisors for everything.
Right.
It's much better to use the right advisors who have the right perspective, purview, right, for the issue that you're actually trying to deal with.
Yeah. Well, and you're getting diversity of thought when you aren't going back to the same well every time. In any event. So, I love it. All right, I'm gonna pivot to one of my favorites, which is, and it's something you address in the book a bit as well, and I'm really interested to hear your comments. Many of us are sort of just now getting to grips with the idea that the business world is not, in fact, a meritocracy. That may apply particularly to women, to people of ethnic minority, to disabled people, but it is not a meritocracy. And you say in the book, there's an understanding or an underlying belief in America that no matter who you are, if you just work hard enough, everything will work out for you. And that's just not true. What do you recommend we think instead? How do we get to grips with the idea that, as my mom always said, life is not fair?
Exactly. My mom said the same thing. And, it's, does it take hard work? The answer is yes, but it's just not enough.
Right.
So it takes hard work with a strategic approach. Those two things together can work, right? And what's a strategic approach? A strategic approach to me is just like strategies, longer term. So what is the goal? And it doesn't have to be 30 years out, it could be a 5-year out, it doesn't, whatever works for you, right? But it's some target in the future. So what is that goal? And then the strategy. So how do I go get there, right? And what can I do in terms of to improve the odds to actually go get there? And then work hard at that. Because the problem is, I can work hard, just digging deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. I'm not going anywhere. I'm working like crazy though. I'm shoveling a lot of stuff, right? But that doesn't get you anywhere, right? You can use the same power and actually just do a shallow trench to wherever it is you're trying to go. Okay,
Right.
so think about this in terms of how do I use the work and the time that I'm putting forward in the most effective way to achieve the outcome I'm trying to achieve. That's really all a strategic approach is. So yes, work hard, but it's not enough.
Right. I love it. Thank you. So I want to turn to you serve, and we talked about this in my intro, and I think it's quite impressive. You serve on the boards of 4 companies, I think now, and that doesn't include the not-for-profits or indeed the advisory roles. You've said that the role of a non-executive director is quite different from that of an executive or a CEO. As a non-exec, your job is to look out for the interests of the shareholders. Your job is not an operational job. Yet what makes good board members are people who've actually run companies and done operational jobs. So people like that, of course, instinctively want to dig in and operate. Our mutual friend, Jan Babiak, has a wonderful phrase to describe the Ned role. She says, noses in, fingers out. How do you ensure you're doing the best job for the shareholders in your Ned role while keeping your fingers out of the business, especially when you've run so many?
Yeah, so true. Well, one of the things that I learned is it's all about how you frame the point. So, fingers in is when you say, well, why don't you do this? That's fingers in. All right. Fingers out, nose in is, have you thought about different ways to approach blah, blah, blah?
Right.
All right. I'm not telling them what to do. I'm asking a question that hopefully is causing them to think, right? And expand on their views. So what I've learned as a board director is it's actually more important the type and quality of the questions you ask, much more so than anything directive. So I try hard not to say anything that is directive, right? I try to put most things into questions as my way of trying to keep my hands out of what's happening and what's going on. Because at the end of the day, as a board director, you don't know the business as well as management does. You will never know the business as well as management does. So you have to make sure that you are confident in the management. So it's fine to ask questions, make sure they're thinking through, right? All things you want to think through at the end of the day. But if you start actually telling management what to do, oh, God help us, because you have no idea the 80 things that are contingent, right, on that one point or this one initiative or this one investment or whatever it might be. So, that's the piece. But you do have to learn it. I mean, when I first started serving on a board, it's kind of like, well, why don't they do this? Why aren't they doing that? I mean, because you're used to it. So you get coached and you have to tamper yourself back, etc. But it actually is a very rewarding experience.
Yeah. Well, you get so much opportunity with different kinds of businesses, which I reckon, given the things that you've done in your career, now the differences in the types of boardrooms that you're in must be rewarding. Really, you learn something in one that you take to the next. That sort of. Yeah, and I think that's what's so valuable, of course, about non-execs in the first place. But there's always, I think, almost everyone always has that. You need a CEO on the board. We want a CEO. An ex-CEO is the best board member. But then I think, from the perspective of someone who's run the business, stepping back is probably the most challenging aspect of that. So, but get it right, and it's very rewarding.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I guess thinking about the role of a CEO or a leader, and you've said it's to establish the clear vision that inspires and excites, which I love. Um, each generation finds different things exciting. And for millennials, you've said that it seems to be along the lines of making the world a better place. That has implications not only for the way profit is generated, but also for the products that are sold and the jobs that people do within the organization. What do today's leaders need to be doing to inspire and excite this generation and the ones to follow?
They need to spend more time listening to them
Mm-hmm.
and understanding, frankly, what is important, and what's not. Because, at the end of the day, as a leader, your job is to create more leaders.
Right.
Because if you aren't creating more leaders, your business and company can't ever grow and expand. So you need to be creating more leaders. And therefore, understanding all the different generations, right, that are coming into your business and what is important, where priorities are, and then putting those things together with what the company's trying to achieve. I mean, that's when the magic happens, right? The magic happens when the company's goals and objectives and individuals' goals and objectives actually are aligned.
Right.
Then you have real power because everybody is passionate, focused, right, inspired in terms to move forward and do the right thing. So spending more time in terms of understanding, for sure. And then, just like we talked about, diversity. Well, there's also diversity of tenure.
Right.
So if the only people you're talking to have 20 plus years in the business, I think you need to expand your circle, right? And get more input in terms of from others. They are, especially if you're in a consumer-oriented business, they are so much more tuned to buying behavior, buying needs, trends that are coming, right? That you can totally either take advantage or completely miss as a result of not actually having that voice in the room. So figuring out how you actually get the diversity of tenure and of age into strategic discussions and deliberations can also strengthen the ultimate result.
Yeah. I mean, for you, does that imply that we need, younger people in the boardroom? Do we need a different approach to how we bring, younger people into leadership in organizations faster? How do you see
I,
that? I mean, there are loads of, different.
Absolutely. A lot of different views on this, right? But I'll tell you, it's not so much that I see it as titles. It's not like, okay, so therefore the next senior vice president has to be 23 to make sure we have that view.
Right.
That's not what I mean. But being able to contribute, being able to voice opinions, right? Share thoughts and ideas, that's not tied to title.
Right.
Right? So we create task forces and scrum groups and task forces. I mean, we create all these things all the time, right, to go after different elements. Well, fine. As we're creating it and we're developing strategy, we want to review, maybe we have a strategy review committee or a strategic input, blah blah. I mean, there's a lot of things that can be created that allow people with different background, skills, knowledge to participate without creating formal roles where this is always what you will do. You want the fluidity of being able to bring in different people and different voices and different perspectives, right? At different times and across the board. So I don't think it has to be a formal in terms of title, role, etc. But I do think it needs to be much more inclusive than it typically is in many companies.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it goes right to the heart of, so much of what we at least hear from millennials. I think there is an impact element to what they are looking for, not only do good, but also, be a part of the doing good, not a cog. I mean, here in the UK in particular, there's an awful lot of discussion around purpose and some of the tension between the purpose of a business and what it needs to be, and perhaps some of the stakeholders and where that expansion of stakeholder might go, versus the original vision, its shareholders and its profit only. And I think that tension between purpose and profit has gotten quite a lot of attention. I know a few of our attendees are wonderful speakers on the subject. What's your view, and how is that playing into leadership in the organizations that are coming to fore today?
Yeah, personally, I think that most of the great companies have always had a purpose.
Mm.
I mean, we're talking about it now, um, but but it's not a new concept. Um, I think what we're trying to do though is to be both more explicit about it. Think about it. Companies have been good corporate citizens in the communities that they operate well before all this became
Oh,
a
yeah.
topic. Doesn't mean
Okay.
every company was, but companies were, right? They sponsored the soccer league, they did this. Why did they do that? Because they operate in the community and they want the community to see them positively, because the community sees them positively, then they'll get support, they'll be able to get employees, they'll be able to get, I mean, there's a reason why you do all this.
Exactly.
It's symbiotic. So the fact that, it used to be only for the shareholder, but now we're saying, oh, it's not just the shareholder, but it's also employees and the community, right? And our ecosystem in terms of suppliers, the whole bit. And people are saying, oh my God, this is terrible. It's like,
Yeah.
no, companies have actually been doing this. Not all companies, but many have already been doing this. It's not new. We're just calling it out because, frankly, I don't know how you sustain long term
Mm-hmm.
if all you're focused on is profits and you are not taking care of employees and customers and the communities in which you operate. And I mean, eventually that just implodes on you. So, I think it's interesting that there's so much debate because I do
Just
think,
stating the obvious now.
I think the best companies take into consideration all their stakeholders and try to make decisions that are best for everyone because they want to sustain over time. And so if they just optimize profits and they don't give back anything to the community is not going to be very helpful when they want to expand. It's like, what?
Right.
Why? Okay. It's just all these things are related.
No, that makes perfect sense. Well, I know we are getting some good questions in the chat, I think. Not that my eyesight's probably good enough to see all of them. So Kate, are there a couple you've pulled out? I know you've been watching probably even more closely than I.
Yes, I've been keeping an eye out. We've had lots come through. Thank you to everybody who've sent through your questions. I thought maybe we'd start with our most upvoted one, which is from Paul in the Q&A. He says, I'm a great believer of the term, we make our own luck. What's your view? And what do you think about luck, being in the right place at the right time? And how does that sit with intentional?
So I'm going to expand on that definition of luck. I believe luck is having the right skills and experience, capability, and attitude when an opportunity presents itself. So therefore, I do believe you can make yourself luckier by intentionally building skills and experience and developing that attitude and capability, all of that, because opportunities come along all the time. It's just that we don't consider them opportunities if we can't take advantage of them. So I think you can help to make your own luck. Does that mean you're responsible for everything that happens? No, I do think there is some luck too, but I do think people who are actually intentional about building skills, experience, and capabilities and having the right attitude in the areas in which they are focused tend to be luckier.
Mm-hmm. I like it. Well, Kate, maybe go ahead.
I was just going to say we had quite a few questions coming in through on the theme of imposter syndrome, particularly about, you gave the advice that it's not real. Is there any more other practical advice that you could give on that? And I guess this kind of ties in with another question that's come through, which was, do you have any thoughts on why a lot of successful people are not honest about their struggles?
Okay.
Yeah,
So remind me if I forget the second part, but let me do the first part first. So the answer is definitely have tips. As a matter of fact, there's a bunch in the book because, like I said, I've been dealing with this for a long time. So if you can't shut that little voice off, all right, then typically when imposter syndrome rears its ugly head, happens when people actually give you an opportunity. Either a promotion, or they invite you into the room, or they ask you to speak, right? Something has happened where they're asking you to do something that you've not done before. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, right? Well, listen, they wouldn't ask you if they didn't think you could do it. So if you can't believe in yourself, believe them. All right? Okay. If that doesn't work, then I fake it. I act like I know what I'm doing. No, shoulders back, deep breath. I'm going to walk in like I know what it's like to be a director of supply chain, because eventually I will. Because you know what? Eventually, you always do. If you think back, you always figure it out. So it's okay to act confident, even if you're not confident, because you will be. You will figure it out. So fake it till you make it. Um, and then, the other one is the cheerleaders, right? You call up somebody and say, oh my God, they want me to do this, that, and the other, and wait till they figure out that I don't know what they think I know, and blah, 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 blah. And then you have somebody say, oh, listen, get over yourself, right? You can totally do this. Look what you've done before. Bop, 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 right? Get out there. You need that cheerleader that's going to build you up and kick you in the butt a little bit, right? To get you out there and moving. So those are all kinds of tips and techniques, but I do talk about it more in the book.
Oh, I love it. I love, I love the idea that you fake it. And I sometimes think, one of the ways to fake it is to remember the number of times you run into people who clearly don't know what they're doing. And that's pretty often. And so if they can do it and show it,
Exactly.
and it's not the end of the world, then it won't be the end of the world if you go in there and fake it. So
it's so true. Just one more point on this, and then I'll come to the second piece.
Yeah.
And that is also realize that every time you take a new job, you're starting at the bottom rung of the learning ladder.
Mhm.
By definition. There's no way you can know everything about the job. You haven't had it before. And everybody feels that way. So if you're feeling like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing, then you know what? You're right where you should be.
Right.
It means you're now at the point where you can learn the most. Right? So just try to reframe it for yourself a little bit. Just remember, you're at the bottom of the learning curve. It's okay. You're going to rise to the top and then you're going to jump to the bottom again. Right? And if you never feel uncomfortable, by the way, then you are coasting. You're not learning, because you only learn when you're feeling uncomfortable, because it means you don't know something. You know what? So if you're coasting, cars only coast downhill. So you got to figure out a way to get uncomfortable.
Yeah, my mantra to myself is, you should be scared a little bit every day. You should be doing something that scares you a little bit, or it's not a good day.
Absolutely. Okay. And so the second part of the question, Kate, remind me, what was the second part?
That was why do you think a lot of successful people aren't honest about their struggles?
Oh, I think because people don't share how hard things are, and therefore they think it's easy for everybody else. And if it's easy for everybody else, I don't want to say it was hard for me, right? Because that's going to make me look weak, or be vulnerable, and all those things. So I think that's why they don't share it, which frankly was why I tried to communicate that in the book, because people don't share it enough. Life's hard for everybody. They make it sound easy. Oh, I took step 1, step 2, had a little hurdle, jumped over that, boom, right, got it. No, doesn't work that way. So that's why.
It's a weakness. It's a weakness point. I think that's exactly right. I think, unfortunately, while people perceive, any sort of struggle as a weakness, that's when they won't share. And in reality, failure is a part of success. So if you're not struggling, you're not doing it right.
Right. I used to tell my team all the time, if you're not failing periodically, then you're not pushing yourself enough. Right. Yeah. So keep pushing.
Exactly.
We actually have a live question through. We've got Laura Spencer. So Laura, you should have a notification on screen if you wanted to ask your question to Tamara and Shellye.
Wonderful, Laura.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Tamara, for providing this opportunity, and Shellye, thank you for sharing your wisdom and insights with us today. My question is, you have a chapter in your book called "Prepare for Opportunity to Appear." I want to know if you could speak a little bit on this, and particularly your thoughts on when one pivots from waiting for an opportunity to appear to creating the opportunity you've prepared for.
Absolutely. So preparing for opportunity to appear is really about this whole, how do you help create your own luck or make yourself luckier? It's looking ahead at what are you trying to do and making sure that you're building some of the skills and capabilities that are required, right, for that, so that you have it when it's time to actually go demonstrate it. That's how you improve, right, in terms of your overall position to that. For me, one of the earliest things that I realized is I needed to be a better speaker, because I was not a very good speaker. I was nervous. I hated to do it. I'm like, oh my God. But I looked around and all the executives could speak. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I forget CEO. I'm not even going to become an executive if I can't improve this. So I worked on it. right? But that's what I mean by prepare for opportunities to appear. Build your skills ahead of when you think you're actually going to need them, because then they'll actually differentiate you when people are looking at who do I want for this job or who do I want in this role. With regards to pivoting and creating your own opportunities, yeah, it's an important piece too. Many times you can create your opportunities by letting people know the kinds of things you're looking for. So, you know, you don't want to wait till everybody just taps you on the shoulder and happens to give you the exact right opportunity you've been looking for. They can't read your mind. So you have to tell them. You know, I say all the time, tell the universe what you want and what you need so the universe can help you. Because it's been my experience that most people in the universe are happy to be helpful if asked in the right way. So let them help you. Let them know what you want. So you can pivot and create your own opportunities by actually sharing what you're looking for. You know, Tamara mentioned in the intro that I ended up doing that stint in Japan. And I was, yes, the first Black female to get an international assignment for IBM. Well, that didn't just happen. I was actually telling people years before that I was interested in doing an overseas assignment in Japan. And I was letting people know what skills and what kind of job. And I was doing that so that when that became available, the hiring manager, he remembered. He was like, you know, and he called me up before he put my name forward to say, Shellye, are you still seriously interested? And I'm like, yes, I am. Right. So tell people what you want so that the opportunities can also come forward your way because people can't read your mind.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, you talk a lot about going public with
Yes.
those ambitions, and frankly, it is obviously the title of your book, really, Unapologetically Ambitious. And making clear to everyone what you want, and I think that doesn't always come naturally.
Yeah, it's true. Can I give an example? Therefore, Tamara, just how to do it. Because listen, when I say, tell people what you want, tell the universe, I don't mean you walk out saying, all right, I want to be CEO. So everybody just get in line and you better support me. No, nobody wants to work with or help somebody like that, right? No. Instead, it would be a conversation, with a manager along the way or somebody who they could be helpful, where you might say, one day, and you don't have to pick the CEO. It could be one day I want to be a chief marketing officer. All right. Do you think I have the potential? Now, the beauty about asking someone if you have potential is a pretty broad, generic kind of term, right? So it's easy for them to say yes. So people say, oh, yes, right? Wonderful. Now you've got the hook in, because once they say yes, then you get to say, great. Do you have any advice for me on experiences you think I ought to get, skills you ought to develop, right? And the reason this is so great is now that they've told you they believe you have potential, they have to tell you something.
Exactly.
All right? They can't just say, I don't know, right? They've got to tell you something. So now when they tell you something, here's where it becomes even better. I'm reeling them in, all right? Once they tell you something, you say, thank you so much, right? And then you go off and you build it, you develop it, you go try it, you do something. And then you give them feedback. Oh, thanks so much for that conversation. I've actually now done bop, 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 and I'm feeling so much more, confident, something. Your advice was so helpful. Is there anyone that you think I ought to talk to as I kind of da-da-da-da? Now you asked your next question, right? And before you know it, you've got a mentor, because now they feel like they're kind of impacting your life, and you're actually doing things, and it's making a difference, and it kind of makes them feel good that they're helping you. And that's how I adopted mentors all through my career. So when I say tell the universe, I don't mean tell the universe. I mean, tell them, but ask and tell in a way in which people will want to help you.
That's perfect. We have a great question that I know you'll want to answer. Have you experienced any barriers throughout your career, or had things go not to plan? And how did you deal with those? And I know you talk about some of that in the book.
Sure. So, it happened a number of times, so the later stage, I didn't become CEO of IBM. That was the goal, and that didn't happen. So what do? You pivot. But I'm a big believer in keep the goal. All right. I wanted to be a CEO. I picked IBM after I picked the CEO because I thought that was a good company. But you know what? As hard as it was to leave IBM, I could go be CEO somewhere else. And so you pivot. If it's not a pivot thing, but there's like a roadblock, I once I was ready to be promoted. I was getting all the good feedback. I achieved everything. Yes, they're telling me I'm ready, but you know what? There are just no opportunities here. There are just no opportunities here. Months and months of just no I'm like, okay. So I went and found a different job. And they're like, oh, wait, you can't leave. No, we don't want you to leave. We just want you to wait. Yeah. So anyway, what happens? I get the opportunity at the company, right? So, you have to take control. And let me just make this one last point. So many times we don't take control of our own careers. And the analogy I would give you is it would be like spending thousands of dollars for an airline ticket and putting your dog in the kennel, telling your neighbors, holding your mail, packing your bags, getting to the airport, strapping into the plane, and then looking at the pilot and saying, so, where are we going anyway? What? You would never, ever do that. But we do that with our careers all the time. We spend tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on education, continuing learning. We join organizations, we get training, all this stuff. And then we do our job and we wait for somebody to tap us and tell us where we're going. No, own your career. Be intentional.
I love it. Absolutely. I think about some of the things you said in the book. One of them resonated because my mother always said, if you blame someone else, then you're not in control. And if you take responsibility, then you control it. And so, you can deliver on the outcome or change the outcome or whatever it may be. And I use that with my kid, of course, but I also use it in my job. And I think that idea of take responsibility. If it didn't go well, sit back and think, of course, sometimes it's not something you could have completely controlled, but at least take responsibility for the fact that you could vote with your feet, get a different job, do something else about it. As you say, own your career. I love that. We had a great question. Certainly one I think I hear a fair bit and really plays right into some of the conversation we've already had. Do you think authentic leadership is important for modern leaders? And what is that? And how, we've talked a little bit about leadership qualities, et cetera, but how do you see that, and has it changed? Has it always been the case? And what is authentic leadership to you?
Yeah, I think being an authentic leader, frankly, is critical. And what that means to me is that you're true to yourself. You're true to yourself. You're true to your value systems. You're true to your over character, elements that are important. So being authentic means you actually are you, right? When you come across. And let me tell you, people figure out really quickly if you're not authentic. And people don't trust people. Full stop. Lots of studies. People do not trust people who are not authentic, because it's like, wait a minute. If you're acting this way, but you're really this way, then what else shouldn't I believe, right? So being an authentic leader, I think, is critical, because it's very difficult to effectively lead an organization over time when your team does not trust you.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah. That's a great point. I just seen another fabulous question from Marie, so I'm going to ask. So how do you recommend striking the balance of really needing the job? And she notes that women and ethnic minorities are often disproportionately reliant on their work or breadwinners in their families, with the risk of being bold in some of the ways that you talk about, in the book of asking and being public. She notes that she's observed different degrees of boldness based on sort of perceived security in the job. Some people can get away with anything, and others clearly can't, or feel they can't. So how do you, how do you recommend sort of finding that balance? And indeed, how do we, I guess, as organizations, think about maybe how that plays out? Because I think we probably don't get the best out of our people when we aren't enabling some risk taking.
Exactly. For sure, in terms of the risk taking. One of the things that I have found is that if you are good, really good, if you are really good at what you do, and you have a high level of respect, then you actually can be a lot more bold. If neither of those are true, then you can't be.
Right.
Now, one of trying to remember how old I was when I finally realized. It was probably it's probably not until I was in my mid to late 30s that I finally realized that, you know what? I can always find a job. Now, it may not be the absolute career that I want. It may not always be the company that I want, but if push comes to shove, I can find a job that will pay me money so that I can actually pay bills.
Yeah. That's
Now, when I realized that was the moment that actually I felt most bold, because I said, all right, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm absolutely going to be the best employee and all those things. But at the same time, my working here is my choice, right? It's my choice. Yes, it's the company's choice, but it's also my choice. So think through, where you are in your career and in your work. And I'm telling you, figure out how you become, one of the best at what you do. And you garner the respect from people around you. Because when you have that, you do get more latitude in being bold. And that's true whether you're a female, Black, anything. Now, what I'm not saying, though, just to be clear, I'm not saying that we all get the same with the benefit of a doubt. That's not true. But those steps will help everybody.
Yeah, no, I like that. Kate, I don't know if you're seeing others. I was going to ask, I think there's a great question from Lee talking about the chapter in your book on cheerleaders, which I think we all love the idea of the cheerleaders. But have you noticed if different nationalities are better at this than others? She notes that here in the UK, celebrating success can sometimes come across as arrogant, and sometimes we're guilty of playing down successes. And there is that sort of, we refer to it as the British Reserve, and that that sense of self-deprecation is probably quite strong, I'd say, here. Have you come across different examples of kind of how celebrating success or cheerleading can work, in your travels?
So the answer is yes. I've had the opportunity and the fortune to travel and work all over the place. So the notion of a cheerleader is the person who's going to remind you, right, of how good you are, how capable you are, give you that confidence and that build up. So it's not for necessarily the world, to hear. And because of that can be expressed in a lot of ways, typically within any culture, because it's a one-on-one conversation. Okay. So it might be expressed with, in the US, it would be a very much, come on, you got this, right? Blah, blah, blah. You'd be very open, In a different culture, maybe in the UK culture, more of, now, Tamara, you know that you are perfectly capable of getting this done, right? I mean, it's right. And it might be, in the Japanese culture, right? It would be a little different. So I think how and the words and the tone may change culture to culture, but the actual act of providing that support, that encouragement, right? That reinforcement and support, that's universal.
Yeah, no, I like it. Kate, have you found some other good ones?
There's two that I've come across that I think are quite interesting. So we've got one from Julia, who talks about being a true believer in taking responsibility for your own success, and that organizations need to change to enable equality of access to that success. So what do you think are the top 3 material changes that organizations need to make to allow for that access to success?
Okay. So a couple things. To allow for access. So one is, I wish every organization would add one adjective to their, I'll call it criterion policies around management. So most organizations have definitions of what they expect from good managers, all levels, right? What you expect. We expect people who can hire teams, who can develop teams, who can indeed build talent to be able to be promoted, right? People who can make sure that work gets done consistently and effectively through teams, right? Very simple. But most companies expect, if you're a manager, you should at least be able to do that, right? Right. Why don't we just add in one word? The ability to hire diverse teams, the ability to develop diverse teams, the ability to promote diverse teams, right? The ability to make sure, just add one adjective.
Yeah.
And then expect it. right? To me, it's a really simple kind of change, but significant in terms of attitude and intention. Two, I think organizations should make sure that their senior people sponsor, not mentor, sponsor two people who don't look like themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Just two people. Everybody should be able to find two, right? And then sponsor them. It's the why. It's good for the people that you're reaching down to sponsor. But the other thing is, it's great for the executives because executives need to know how to develop talent. They need to know how to spot talent, right? They need to understand some of the challenges and issues in actually being successful with an organization. All of that they'll get visibility to if they're sponsoring people who are different from them, right? So those are two things that organizations can do. And the third is just, if you want access to opportunities to exist in terms of across the organization, then make sure there's actually transparency around what kind of opportunities exist. You know, there's still a lot of companies out there that when they have new jobs or new roles, it's a secret. It's a secret. Okay. I think that's kind of crazy. Things ought to be much more transparent.
Yeah. Well, you raised one of my favorite topics, so I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about the difference between a sponsor and a mentor. It's probably my favorite subject because we, often hear them confused. Maybe tell us your perspective.
Sure. So I see a mentor-mentee relationship is more of a reactive relationship on the behalf of the mentor. Meaning, if a mentee-mentor, it's really up to the mentee. Mentee should be the one reaching out to the mentor, right? The one that actually sets the agenda, that kind of controls. They're asking for help and advice. It's kind of reactive. I see a sponsor as a proactive responsibility. Someone who's proactively trying to help and support someone as they build their career, someone who is opening doors, someone who is talking about and supporting a person when they're not in the room, right? Yeah. It's proactive. So there's one word difference, that sponsor is a proactive, reach, help, pull up, whereas a mentor is a reactive to support, guide, and coach.
And I always think with sponsor, I suppose I'm very much of the view that it's not an altruistic effort. As you pointed out, executives, people in management need to demonstrate that they talent spot well. They need to demonstrate that they build good teams. So actually, when they are sponsoring, it really is, an investment they're making, and they're making it in the sponsee, but they're also getting something back. When that is successful, their power grows, their perception of success and perception of talent spotting and management skill and all those things also increases. So it's very much that two-way street. Whereas I, like you, think of mentor as something you're doing to help someone. It's lovely. There's again often a two-way, and certainly the benefits, as you describe, of feeling good and wanting to help. It's not the same as investing in them.
Very true. I fully agree.
Kate, any others? We're going to wrap up here shortly, but there have been so many good questions.
There's another one that's come through, and it is, how would you recommend working with a line manager who isn't necessarily as focused on development and management of the team? This person's new and wants to progress in the team, but certainly doesn't want to ruffle any feathers.
So not everybody, fortunately, focuses on the whole development of their teams and of talent. Unfortunately, it's true. That doesn't mean they're not capable of doing it. So my first step is give them a chance to do it. And the way you give them a chance to do it is by trying to make it easy for them, right? At least that's the way I've done it. And how do you make it easy? Mm-hmm. You basically go, it's all about questions, right? Meaning, yourself. Most people have areas that they're trying to develop or improve. I want to be a better speaker. I want to make sure I'm more effective in how I put together my proposals, whatever it might be. So whatever it is that you're trying to improve upon, right, or develop, be really specific. Have a conversation with your boss and say, I'm really trying to strengthen my proposals, right, that I send to da-da-da-da-da. Do you have any suggestions on what I could do to actually raise my game just to the next level? Now, by asking something very specific, all right, it gives them a chance to actually focus. So focus, and typically they'll have something to say. Whereas when you ask somebody, do you have any feedback for me? No, you're doing great, right? That's what people say. No, you're doing great. Why do they say that? Because it's easy. All right, it's just a cop out. So never accept a no, you're doing great. Nobody, not even me, not Tamara, nobody is great at everything. Nobody is. So if people tell you, no, you're doing great, get worried because it means you don't know, right? So instead, just come back, pick your different areas at different times, right? Hey, I'm really working on, whatever this might be. Any thoughts on this? Or could you take a look at this? How can I make this even more impactful, right? More persuasive, more, whatever it might be. But I find when you make it specific, then people will actually give you real feedback, especially if you make it easy. You're asking them how you improve. You're not asking them to tell you where you're bad, because people don't like giving other people negative feedback. Very few people do. It's uncomfortable. It feels bad. And so that's why people don't do it.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I know we're going to run short of time, so I'm going to ask one last question, and it's a really easy one, which is, for anyone out there looking to be ambitious about their, next role, probably even CEO, because I know we'll have some wonderful, young people in particular aiming for that. What's your most important piece of advice for them? What do they need to go home and do right now and think about?
Yeah, absolutely. No matter where you are in your career, it's important that people actually know what you do, what you actually do. So many times, in our cultures, we ask people all the time, oh, what do you do? And what do people do? They tell other people their titles.
Exactly.
Well, listen, I hate to tell you, for as much as we negotiate and get excited and yearn after titles, they are meaningless, because a vice president of operations doesn't tell anybody anything about what your responsibilities are, what your skills are, right? Or what you're capable of. And therefore, if new opportunities come about, if cool task forces are being put together, if neat initiatives are going on, they won't think of you because they don't know what you actually do. So instead, make sure whenever you're talking to people, never stop at your title. Add 20 seconds, which is, oh, I'm the vice president of operations. I'm responsible for all of our supply chain, blah, 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 blah. Boom, 20 seconds. Now they know, okay, Shellye is a leader and a manager because she has all this. She's got supply chain. She's got, right? That's what you want. Then people will think of you when they have opportunities. It'll help you improve that luck we talked about before.
Absolutely. Well, Shellye, I can't thank you enough. I think this has been not only great fun, but also, as I expected, a great learning experience. You've been fantastic. So thank you for spending time with us tonight. And I can leave all of our audience with, please, if you have not already, and I know many of you have, purchased Shellye's book, please go do so. We were so fortunate to hear good things, but it's even better when you get to read the whole thing. So please go do that. I know you'll enjoy it. It's got more and more advice than she was able to offer in this short time. So thank you for everything, Shellye.
Oh, listen, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And thanks for all the questions, everybody. That's my favorite part. So appreciate it.
Exactly. Bye.